Welcome to the Volpe Report podcast, the state's premier public affairs show dedicated to the topics that matter most to Pennsylvanians. I'm your host, Chuck Volpe. Join us now as we speak to this week's guest.
The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is brought to you by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial. The area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Congressman, welcome back to part two of what's basically your show. We saved some of the good parts for part two, but we still have some stuff I want to get into because it bears mention. Like in last week's segment, of course, we talked about the travesty and tragedy of California, where the bad leadership that we discussed, and for all those people, that say, oh, you can't, let's not talk about that. No. You need to talk about this. They can stick it, stow it. We need to talk about the failure of leadership that has wiped out most of Southern California, destroyed lives, killed people, and as they were diverting water they needed for the fires into the Pacific because there was a smelt species that could face extinction. Yeah. We didn't even talk about another part of that, and I'll just make the comment. Also, their DEI hiring practices. They have probably more women firefighters. Now, people say, what's wrong with women being firefighters? Well, it's all right, except that when you have to carry other human beings out of burning buildings and carry heavy fire hoses. So there should be women in the fire department, in positions of management, in positions of leadership, and assisting in ways that can be done properly, but not running into buildings that they can't do. So, look, it's the whole thing is California has been exposed of being a joke and worse, dangerous for their people. And last but not least, they have, Dan, and you're aware of this, I know, in the last 3 or 4 years, have led the nation in exodus. For 48 straight years in America, California's population grew year after year after year. They increased their electoral votes. Their congressional seats went up and up and up. Well, for 4 consecutive years now, thanks to Gavin Newsom, they have been bleeding population. There's a projection in the 2030 census. Check this out. They could lose between 5 and 7 congressional seats in California. That's the amount of population. They're heading to Indiana. They're heading to Texas. They're heading to Arizona. They're heading to all these other places. But now we're going to talk about another issue that I have to mention. I lived through 1980. Lived through it. And full disclosure, as you know, I was a Democrat. I was campaigning in 1980 in the Democratic primary in Nashua, New Hampshire, for President Jimmy Carter, president of the College Democrats at the University of Scranton, trying to stave off, if you remember Ted Kennedy, an intra-party fight because he, of course, challenged Carter in that race. Yeah. I remember vividly watching a similar circumstance. The country was in exactly the same place. They didn't call it woke back then, but far-left progressive policies had dominated politics in the country. And we had record inflation. We had an energy crisis in the Carter administration. I remember my parents could only get gas on even-numbered days, Dan. That's how bad. I played high school basketball at Bishop Hannon. And I always looked forward to being a varsity player, to play games at 8 o'clock, 7:30 at night in crowded gyms. We were playing our games before no people in the middle of the afternoon so they could save energy with the lights and the heat of the building. I lived through that, so I could talk to it. But back to my point, we also had something segueing when Ronald Reagan, of course, another mandate landslide, killed Carter. He's coming into office in 1980, actually January of 1981. And right as he's about to get sworn in, after 400 some days of captivity, like an amazing thing happened, they released the hostages, and the hostages came home. I'll never forget, my Oakland Raiders were playing in the Superdome. They had a big yellow ribbon around it on Super Bowl Sunday. I'll never forget that day and that time. And look, it was clear there was a direct correlation to President Ronald Reagan's leadership, toughness, The folks in Iran already knew what they would be dealing with. Hostages came home. Well, there's a direct parallel that just happened I think most people know about. After all this time, 400 days or whatever it is, over a year since October 7th, there's been no ceasefire, no progress between Israel and Hamas. The war rages on. Virtually no hostages were released. So, and all of a sudden, President Donald Trump stands up at Mar-a-Lago a few days ago. I watched the press conference and says, if they don't get hostages back in a ceasefire before I get sworn in, there will be hell to pay. 48 hours later, a miracle.
Yeah.
Ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, and hostage exchanges are taking place. Hostages will be getting released. And I have to say, I'm appalled. The first guy that shuffled up to the microphone to take credit was Joe Biden, when he was the perpetrator, really, of having all this disaster for a year.
Yeah.
We all knew who the real person behind this was. They got the message loud and clear. So I'd like your comment on that. That's a historic moment for our country being a leader in the world again, Dan.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, we're done with the Biden administration. Just a couple of days here. You know, dating back, Bob Gates once said Joe Biden was on the opposite side of the wrong side of every foreign affairs decision made during his time in the Senate. Obama stated that never underestimate Joe's ability to muck things up, I'll say. And look, he did it. He did it in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was just such a disaster. So not just disheartening, such a loss of life, which is most important. Literally $80 billion of military hardware, a base that is now largely run by China. The Taliban has come back. That's just one example of what this guy did. And that's and the administration, not just him, the administration, the woke thinking. Now, I say that, now some people might get upset. Oh, what does that mean? It means that you're not serious. It means that you think you're thinking at a higher level of humanitarianness. Oh, let's let the Taliban run themselves because they can. No, they can't. They're a terrorist organization, and they're now radicalizing people around the world. And Afghanistan was proven to be a pivotal mistake, which also has led to giving Putin the green light for the Ukraine.
Some of those, by the way, terrorists, Dan, are coming through our southern border.
That occurred, okay? I've had classified and declassified. How they handled the Ukraine was absolutely abysmal. So we have those wars, not backing Netanyahu, basically not backing Israel by this administration, constantly on their backs, trying to tell them what to do. Then they get raided on October 7th. People are murdered. All kinds of atrocities take place. We've seen the videos. I saw more videos on it than my stomach could take. And yet they continue to try to side basically with the terrorists. So and that emboldens them. That gives them strength. That gives them moral fortitude. So from the United States, for crying out loud. So all of these things were just terrible moves. And then you have Donald Trump. Donald Trump, we saw the look on his face. He meant every word he said. All hell will break loose. And look what's happening. Okay, it's just like what as you brought up, Reagan. They knew what was going to occur, and certainly they know now. Now they're already playing a couple of games, but we got bad news for them. Let them play these games. Don't release those hostages. And you know what? They're going to know what hell is like in a few days.
No doubt. And I'm proud. It was wonderful watching the testimony of Secretary of Defense designate Pete Hegseth walk into the lion's den of the Democratic senators, asking him about what his favorite liquor was and what his drinking habits are and what his marriage. Are you kidding me? But beyond what he said, and the message was loud and clear about how we are going to proceed in this country. And the president speaking and embodying that spirit from the president, we are not going to be messed around with anymore. He was clear and unequivocal of his support for Israel and where America would be relative to Israel. So I want to almost use a line that Clint Eastwood once famously used, and I was a big Dirty Harry fan, when he said, "Go ahead, make my day." That should be the slogan for the inauguration. Go ahead, make our day. But One other comment on that from you, Dan, to kind of tidy it up before I switch to, no pun intended, as fellow Republicans, the elephant in the room we'll come back to, and that is, a career move for you. But let's finish this subject.
And look, Trump's going to be very serious. He's going to have a real sense of urgency. He's got people around him that know the plan and are going to execute the plan. And if they don't, to his satisfaction, they're going to be gone. They're going to be history. But he brought people in that he believes completely, and I think we've seen in testimony, understand what the America First agenda truly is about. And I think that's why Speaker Johnson is still in the position he's in, because he's shown that. And John Thune definitely does, and Dave McCormick and others. And we're not going to make good the enemy of perfect, because nothing's ever perfect. We're going to move the ball upfield, however, and we're going to accomplish what was stated to be accomplished. And that's what people want. That's what people demand. That's what they deserve.
Right. Well, now we get to the part that is going to be actually my favorite part of this show. And, when rumors and reports first broke, I was actually in Palm Beach last week. As you're aware, I got a call from my wife, Ellen, who's one of your biggest fans. She said, "Did you hear the news?" I said, "Look, I'm out of sight, out of mind. I'm on a golf course, playing badly, by the way." And at any rate, she said, "There's reports breaking that our good friend Dan Meuser is considering running for governor of Pennsylvania." And of course, me, I took it in stride and said, "Well, look, I'm proud to call Dan a good friend," which means we've had these discussions going back months. We actually first had them 2 years ago, when I still think you should have run 2 years ago. But whatever, it's history now. You had good reasons for not running, and frankly, our status in Congress right now might be as good if you had not stayed. So, but having said that, it is true now. You are seriously considering a run for governor. So, first question out of the gate is, why?
Well, Chuck, first of all, I'm considering it, right? I'm not announcing, I'm not stating I'm running,
right,
but I'm strongly considering it, largely because I think Pennsylvania should be far greater of a place to live and work and raise our families than it is today. Sometimes I state that if Pennsylvania were a stock, we're at 20, we should be at 40, we can go to 80, if not 100. We've got all it takes. We've got great people. We've got the resources. We're an energy producing state. We know manufacturing. We have beautiful cities. We've got incredible landscape for tourism. We've got it all. Geographically, my district is 10-hour drive to 65% of North America, not just the United States population, North America. There's so much there. And we need to embrace it. We need a vision, we need a plan, and we need to execute. Look, I don't come into this just out of the blue, right? I mean, I've been in business, helped grow a business in Pennsylvania for over 20 years. I was served as revenue secretary under the Corbett administration. I understand how our agencies on the state level work, what needs to be done in order for them to run in a highly effective customer service oriented manner, and with minimal costs. Deliver more with less. It can be done. We did it at Revenue. We were named during my time there the most improved Department of Revenue in the country, bringing our grade from a D to an A minus. And frankly, we could have done a lot better if we would have had more time, or if I know what I know now. So I feel I got the background, the ability. I feel ready to do it. And most importantly, as I said, I'm so tired of Pennsylvania being considered number 35, number 36 of where best places to work, number 37 for crying out loud as far as public education goes. And meanwhile, we got some of the best schools. Why are we rated number 37? Quality of life, where you want to raise a family, where you want to start a business. We're in the bottom. We're not moving up. And meanwhile, you got places like Texas and Florida and Indiana and Georgia and Tennessee and other places that are flourishing, and young people are going there. Their populations are going up. They're picking up members of Congress. We're losing them. And there's no reason for it. The only difference is the leadership. Ron DeSantis, phenomenal job in Florida, just absolutely phenomenal. Every time I read about his planning, what they're doing, how they're executing, how he sets things up, how he's got a CFO that looks after small businesses, how he says things like DEI, Florida is where DEI goes to die.
It is dead. DEI's done, Dan. DEI's done.
And what he means by that is what Martin Luther King meant. Okay, the content of your character, not the color of your skin. Let's get real. Let's bring people up. Let's, of course, give everyone equal opportunity, and equal chance. We need to create that. But in Pennsylvania, there's just this heavy burden that is apparently on us from a tax standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, from currently a governor right now that hates fossil fuels. I mean, it's not going anywhere. He has not improved it. I don't see him with
Dan. He reneged on a major campaign promise. He said he would support fossil fuel. He would support oil drilling. He would support fracking. The first thing he did as governor is appeal a Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania decision which said that you couldn't put us into RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, because only the General Assembly can do that because it's effectively a tax, and executives, governors, and presidents can't tax. That's your job or the General Assembly's job. Right. Well, what he did, instead of keeping his campaign promise, he appealed it to the Supreme Court.
I know. I know. And how he could go to Pittsburgh or even Philly, see the crime that exists in Philly, and see how dilapidated Pittsburgh has come just in the last 4 to 6 years. So, and then to the agencies, as I said, there's no modernization, there's no advancement, there's no limiting the size of government and delivering better services. DEP still stands for don't expect permits. They're not.
Every one of your shows, you come up with a bumper sticker worthy line. I love it. I love it.
And these things are under the governor's purview. You can correct these agencies. We can model it after Florida, model it after Texas. Let's do that and then start creating our own standard. It could be a blast. That's another reason I like to do it. We could pull together the legislator, the state house, filled with great people. The state senate, great people, partners. You got to treat them as governor. You got to treat them like your board of directors, right? They got to be on board. They got to be fully part of this. They know the constituencies. You got to figure better than you. But anyway, all of that, it's a group thing. It's not one person. It would be administration in partnership with our legislators, and have a plan that everybody gets. Just like as I was stating with President Trump, I mean, how his cabinet knows his plan, knows what he wants, knows the result, knows they're going to be measured on the results advancing. And these things can be done, and Pennsylvania within 4 to 6 years can be in the top 10, if not mentioned in the same arena that the Florida, Texases, Indianas are. And I'll tell you something else, AI, right? AI, all these data centers. Pennsylvania should be the place they want to come. We are an energy producing state. We've got it. We've got the nuclear plant. TMI is being restarted up. The Berwick plant is going to bring in Amazon and others if we do it right. Think of how important and high paying those tech jobs are, and to bring that level of technology to our great Commonwealth. That's just one more reason why, with the right leadership, this just certainly can be done.
Right. And another subject that I have become a major donor to the Commonwealth Foundation, Commonwealth Leadership Fund, as you know. So I know you know Matt Briette very well, one of the leaders in this state. We've had many conversations. They're they're conservative and. But one of their biggest issues, Dan, is school choice, as you're aware. That's another thing. Governor Josh Shapiro ran on a promise to support school choice. His own children are in private school, not public schools, and he reneged on that promise. And all that nonsense about, it was the Democrats in the House. The Democrats in the House would have followed the lead of their Democratic governor. That was crap. It was cover. So his two major campaign promises, to appear moderate, to move from the far left into the middle, he reneged on both.
Yeah, you're right.
School choice.
Our energy standard is Connecticut's energy standard, the Reggie renamed Pacer. And I'll tell you something, the whole thing of school choice, talk about choosing the teachers' unions over our students. It's an outrage that we force kids based upon their zip code or what their address is, where they have to go to school, and at the level of expenses. We've got to have a school choice system. We've got to have school vouchers. It's for kids' safety. It's certainly for their educational ability, and it's for parents. Parents know what level of comfort and whether or not their child's getting the right education. Why are we continuing with this social experiment if it continues to fail? Basically, I'm not saying it's terrible. Okay, we've all had. I was at public school. We all had some very, very good teachers, but in the overall outcomes of our school system should be much, much better, and school choice would absolutely create that environment.
Yeah. And let me say something, because we're close to the same age. I'm older than you and everybody else I know anymore, unfortunately. But the public school you're talking about, Dan, decades ago, does not exist today. It doesn't. Back then, the nefarious and almost like metastasizing cancer of the PSEA and the teachers' unions, they have gotten down a far left radical path. They support gender-affirming care for third graders. They support things like a race and ideology being introduced into the classroom and critical race theory elements. Glenn Youngkin ran against, to make a similar comparison.
Yeah.
Glenn Youngkin in Virginia, everybody said, you can't win, why are you going to run? Joe Biden just won Virginia by like 12 points. It was a landslide, deep blue state, and you're running against a McAuliffe, a governor who's already been a Democratic governor. They can't run consecutive terms there, as you know. So he had been governor, had to take a term off. Now he's running again. So he was like an incumbent governor that you'll face. They said it couldn't be done. And what Glenn Youngkin did was talked about your values, talked about what you're talking about. One of his biggest issues of all was the issue of the teachers' unions, what they had done during the pandemic, how they were failing in education. He got on the side of the parents and parents' rights. That was the basis for running. I'm for parents' rights in dictating their children's upbringing, morality, religion, education, not school teachers, not union members, and he won a resounding victory. And so, look, there is precedent, even though you're running against a popular governor who won by a big margin last time, there's precedent for what you're going to do, clearly.
Yeah. You know, on the schools front, as we're discussing, you got to beat back that ideological wokeness, for lack of a better term. The school boards, God bless those who run for school boards and are on school boards that are getting this and pushing back, because it's just wrong. You know, it's happened at some of our fine universities, of course, throughout Pennsylvania, and it's just wrong. The bias that comes from these professors and the grading system, unless you write things in the most liberal way, you're not going to get an A, for crying out loud. That is just that. Even if the child knows differently or believes differently, it's supposed to be a laboratory of thought and debate and discussion, not this unbelievable bias that exists. And
crucibles of conformity, Dan.
Yeah,
instead
right.
of crucibles
and
of thought,
they're
crucibles of enforced conformity.
It's wrong, and you know what? You need a governor that's going to point this out. It's going to talk this way, as Ron DeSantis does, as Greg Abbott does, as those who are willing to face the truth and voice the truth. Heck, even John Fetterman lately has been recognizing the truth.
Right.
Okay, and good.
Yeah, good.
Keep it up.
Well stated. Well, I'll make one more parallel, because I can speak directly to it. When I was running again as a Democrat all those years ago, there was a person who announced initially on the Republican side as a prohibitive underdog. And what I mean by that, you had a very popular Attorney General of Pennsylvania, Ernie Priate. You had other big heavyweights in that race. A person that had just run for mayor of Philadelphia, Republican. You had major players. Sam Katz, I think, was his name back then. I'm dating my 30-some years ago. There was this little-known United States Congressman from Erie in 1994. And during the campaign and during our debates and televised debates and forums, in fact, I tell the story, we showed up, the only two governor candidates out of 13 or so combined DNRs. I was the only D and he was the only R that showed up. And that was a person I became friends with, Tom Ridge. And he had the earpiece in his ear from an old combat injury and all that, served his country. A wonderful man. We got to the point of where I ended up purely by mistake walking down the right side of the street. It was a Columbus Day parade we were in. He's walking down the left side. He says, "Hey, Volpe." He goes, "You're a Democrat, I'm a Republican. Let me get on the right side of the street. I'll come back to the left." But at any rate, getting back to the point, he went on to start accumulating endorsement. Maybe most important was the grand dam of the Republican Party, Elsie Hillman from Pittsburgh. And in what was thought to be a long shot campaign, he went on, won the Republican primary, shockingly. Then he went on to beat the guy that beat me, Mark Single, the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania. And I want to say in the last 30 or so years, if I had to point to a golden age of Pennsylvania governance, it would have been the years that Republican Tom Ridge, between 1994 and 2002, when Ed Rendell took over and brought the Democrats back, that would be a golden age. Education was good. Business opportunity was good. Taxes were low. I'd love to see what our electoral votes and how many congressmen we had back then. I want to say 22 instead of 19. But having said all that, you have a great message. You have a track record of winning, and you have demonstrated in these two parts. Anybody that had any doubt about your ability to be a governor, or for that matter, maybe someday a presidential candidate, you've now checked that box, my friend. Godspeed on your decision making.
Thank you, Chuck. I'll certainly keep you informed, and we're going to deliberate and see if it can come together. And I'll tell you what, the only way I'll get in is if I'm certain that we have better than a fighting chance, that I fully believe that we will win. Right. And with the right message and the right plan and the right organization, I think we can help Pennsylvania get on the corrective course, just as Donald Trump is going to put the U.S. on a corrective course.
Well, I'll add this. It's definitely not going to hurt your chances in trying to put this organization together when you have a personal friendship with the President of the United States, who I have no doubt will be here campaigning for you. He's beloved in Pennsylvania. And a good friend in Dave McCormick, who is your dear friend, and you helped elect United States Senator. And at least I hope, a person who's about to become the chairman of the Republican Party of Pennsylvania, our mutual good friend, Senator Greg Rothman, Pennsylvania Senator, who Senator Dave McCormick has endorsed. So you have a lot of people. When I walked around that room at the ball of Dave McCormick swearing in, you were at that party. I want to point out that I can't tell you how many people, when we were talking, came over to say hello to you, that knew about it and have already said, "We're with you." Nate Navala, Chief of Staff to Guy Reschenthaler, the Deputy Whip out there in your house. That would be a great thing. Sam DeMarco, by the way, the Republican chairman you know well in Allegheny County, he just took a job opening the office for Dave McCormick. So you already have the organization, and I hope you'll give it serious consideration. Godspeed, Congressman.
Thank you, Chuck. You're the best. God bless.
Thanks. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Volpe Report podcast. Be sure to visit our YouTube and Facebook pages for upcoming episodes. You can catch up on the Volpe Report podcast on your favorite podcast provider.